What is to be restored? This is the question at the basis of this lecture. Especially, this module addresses the issue of the definition, evolution, and differences between architectural heritage and cultural heritage in all its forms, linked to tangible and intangible values. In particular, it is retracing the salient features of this development that this module will focus attention on the richness inherent in the heritage diversity, in the perspective of the conservation and preservation of the cultural heritage assets inherited from the past. As a matter of fact, starting from the emergence of the discipline of architectural restoration in the 19th century, in the modern sense, the attention initially given to individual monuments recognized as historical documents has progressively extended. The first restoration charts refer in particular to architectural monuments, historic monuments, and historical documents. The reference is to the resolution of the Fourth Congress of Italian Engineers and Architects, held in Rome in 1883, and gathering the theory of Camillo Boito, as well as to the 1931 Athens Charter for the restoration of historic monuments and the 1932 Italian Restoration Charter. As anticipated, these restoration charts focus attention essentially to individual historic monuments. But after this basis, the concept of architectural heritage and cultural heritage evolved significantly, and new values in the material and immaterial proofs of the past were progressively recognized. A significant contribution in this direction was given at the beginning of the 20th century by Alois Riegl, who in 1993, with the modern cult of monuments, introduced a theory of values founded on the value of antique, the historical value, the intentional value as memory, the value of use, and the artistic value. The value of antique relates to the state of mind produced by the conception of the natural course of becoming. The historical value refers to memory, and it is an involuntary value, which we attribute in the contemporaneity. The intentional value, as memory, instead, refers to a work of the human hand created for the determined purpose of preserving, either present and alive, individual human acts or destinies, or even aggregates of them, in the consciousness of the generations to come. And then there are the value of use and the artistic value, which are contemporary values that complete the theory of values by Alois Riegl. The value of use is that related to the monument's practical function, while the artistic value refers to the aesthetic ideals of which the work is the bearer. After this relevant contribution related to the values recognized in the heritage inherited from the past, it is on the basis of the theories developed by figures such as Gustavo Giovannoni and then Roberto Pane that in the second half of the 20th century, the concept of cultural heritage began to include not only individual architectural monuments, but also the environment surrounding them, as well as the historic town centers. In this regard, very important documents that have been elaborated are the 1960 Gubbio Charter for the safeguarding of the historic centers, and especially the 1964 Venice Charter, a pillar document for the conservation and preservation of cultural heritage monuments and sites. As a matter of fact, it is after the end of the Second World War that the concept of historic monument and cultural heritage started embracing both the single architectural work and the urban or rural setting in which it can be found the evidence of a particular civilization, a significant development, or a historic event. In the 1970s, if the second edition of The Theory of Restoration by Cesare Brandi included among its pages the 1972 Italian Restoration Charter, the need for the protection of the cultural and natural heritage, recognized as a world heritage of humanity, has been declared by UNESCO in the 1972 Convention concerning the protection of the world cultural and natural heritage. In those and the following years, some important documents paid special attention to the human settlements, the historic gardens, centers and towns, and the urban areas, such as the 1978 Charter of Machu Picchu, dedicated to the conservation of the historic centers, the 1981 Florence Charter focused on the issues related to the historic gardens, the 1986 Noto Charter on the perspectives for the conservation and rehabilitation of the historic centers, and the Charter for the Conservation of Historic Towns and Urban Areas, promoted by ICOMOS in 1987. Therefore, if the 20th century saw the emergence of a commitment in favor of the safeguarding not only of the architectural assets, but also of the ancient environments, cities, urban areas, centers, and historic gardens, the last decades of the past century were characterized by a continuous increasing broadening of the meaning of cultural heritage. Specific documents began to be dedicated, for example, and mentioning a few of them, to the objects of art and culture, such as in the case of the 1987 Charter of Conservation and Restoration of Objects of Art and Culture by the Italian National Research Council, the archaeological heritage, for which in 1990 it has been elaborated the Charter for the Protection and Management of the Archaeological Heritage by ICOMOS, the underwater cultural heritage, to which in 1996 ICOMOS dedicated the Charter on the Protection and Management of Underwater Cultural Heritage, the built vernacular heritage, for which in 1999 it has been elaborated the Charter on the built vernacular heritage by ICOMOS, the landscape, for which the Council of Europe issued the European Landscape Convention in 2000, the architectural heritage, with documents specifically dedicated to themes and aspects such as the 2003 Principles for the Analysis, Conservation and Structural Restoration of Architectural Heritage by ICOMOS, the cultural roots, to which in 2008 ICOMOS dedicated the Charter on Cultural Roots, the industrial heritage, with the 2011 Principles for the Conservation of Industrial Heritage Sites, Structures, Areas and Landscapes, promoted by ICOMOS, as well as the rural landscapes, for which in 2017 it has been developed the Principles concerning rural landscapes as heritage by ICOMOS. Furthermore, the concept of cultural heritage progressively included also assets of the recent past of recognized cultural value, such as the 20th century architectural heritage, for which it has been elaborated documents such as the 1991 10 points of the Modern Monuments Committee, the 2011 approaches for the conservation of 20th century architectural heritage by ICOMOS, and the 2013 Colloquium to Advance the Practice of Conserving Modern Heritage by the Getty Conservation Institute. Moreover, the concept of cultural heritage progressively included also the intangible heritage, for which in 2003 it has been enacted the Convention for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage by UNESCO. In parallel, attention has increasingly broadened toward the aspects related to the cultural significance of places. And in this regard, it is starting from 1979 that ICOMOS elaborated guidelines for the conservation of places of cultural significance. Therefore, within the framework of the extension of the cultural heritage significance, the recognition of values in the proofs of the past encompass both the tangible and intangible spheres, in the awareness of the cultural legacy transmitted by the tangible and intangible heritage. In 1985, the Convention for the Protection of the Architectural Heritage of Europe by the Council of Europe recognized that architectural heritage not only bears inestimable witness to our past and is a common heritage of all, but constitutes an irreplaceable expression of the richness and diversity of cultural heritage. In the following years, after the 1994 NARA document on authenticity, the 2005 UNESCO Convention on the Protection and Promotion of the Diversity of Cultural Expressions, as well as the 2012 Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, recovered the theme, reaffirming the potential inherent in the richness of the diversity of the cultures and the various cultural expressions. And it is precisely in this diversity that lies the richness of cultural heritage, that conservation and preservation have the task to transmit to the future generations.